in an order that I'm not sure what to do with the order. Now, here's why. As an American who's grown up, kind of in the tradition of Western civilization and where we set in the way that we learn things and we do things, we like a story in a certain chronological order. And I am most comfortable if you're telling me a story and it begins at the beginning and it has a middle and it has an end and you go in that order, I can usually follow you. Now, I have some family members who aren't here this morning, but I've got one family member who tells a story in completely random order, and it's confusing. And if they're listening to me say something, it's like if you're on stairs, there's step 1, there's step 2, there's step 3, you eventually get to the top. If you're a piece of spaghetti, you go around in this circle like this, and it gets confusing. And I got a little bit confused in my study of Isaiah because, you got to remember in the timeline that this is going on, there's a series of kings. The last king is a guy by the name of Hezekiah, and Isaiah is talking about stuff that happens over many, many hundreds of years. And so here in chapter 47, we have God talking about something, and it's like he takes a step out. Now, if you remember the last several weeks, he said things like, who is a God like me who can tell you stuff from the beginning? I can tell you stuff today. It's going to happen way out here in the future. I can tell you the beginning from the end in advance. And so Isaiah 47, he's already told us that Cyrus is going to come and the Persians are going to take over the Babylonians. Well, he's telling us that the Babylonians still haven't taken over Israel yet. He really is telling us the story almost in a kind of inverted order to be able to say, hey, I'm telling you today what's going to happen in the distant future. And in the future, when you look back and you read what happened in the past, you're going to be able to tell that I was able to tell you all the parts out of order because I knew what was going to happen. And so it's another type of evidence. Well, the other thing that makes Isaiah 47 confusing for me is it's talking about motives. Now, everybody here, when I say motive, you've seen a cop show, right? Because they're trying to solve the mystery and what's this person's motive for what they've done. Well, chapter 47 starts talking about God's motive for punishing the Babylonians. Now, if you're following the story at all, and you've paid any attention and not just use this for nap time every week, right? You know that the story that's going on with Israel is you guys have been worshiping false gods, and I'm going to punish you. And I'm going to use these other nations to punish you. And we've seen when, for instance, when Hezekiah repented, God didn't let the Assyrians wipe him out. Right, so we've seen that. So God's capable, and he's made this point. I'm going to whistle, and this king's going to come and do this, and I'm going to call this one. He's going to come over from over here. He's going to do this. Well, we see that, and it happens, and he talks about it. And he's kind of making the point, I can use all these people to do my bidding. I'm God. I'm in control here. And that's probably a good lesson for us as Christians today to pick up on. He's God. He's still in control. But he's talking about motives. Well, if God told you to do something, what's your motive for doing it? God said so. That's a really good motive. In fact, you can write that one down. God said so. That's why I did it. On Judgment Day, that will always be an okay answer. All right? So why is he talking about motives? He's talking about the motives of the Babylonians. And get this, they're doing the thing he told them to do, but God doesn't like their motives. God's going to punish the Babylonians in the future stuff that he's telling the Jewish people in the past, to us, that the Babylonians were to do in response to him telling them to do it. This gets just a little bit spaghetti-like, doesn't it? And so we don't have maybe the logical progression of thought that you'd like to see. We have this other thing going on. So if I start reading this morning, you're like, why is he talking about that? Because that was the order God put it in, and I'm not smarter than God, so I'm just going to go with what he's got here. Chapter 47, verse 1. Come down and set in the dust, virgin daughter of Babylon. Set on the ground without a home, daughter of Chaldea. For you shall no more be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind meal. Remove your veil. Strip off your robe, uncover your legs, pass through the rivers. Your nakedness shall be uncovered, and your shame shall be seen. I will take vengeance, and I will spare no one. Wait a second. Isn't God using the Babylonians to punish the Israelites? And now God has already told us before he's even bringing this punishment out that he's going to redeem the Israelites. That's the first point of the next verse. Our Redeemer, the Lord of hosts is his name, is the Holy One of Israel. Yes, he's a Redeemer of Israel. God is now going to harm them after he used them to do his will. Set in silence and go into darkness, daughter of Chaldea, for you shall no more be called the mistress of kingdoms. The Babylonian Empire was one of the richest, most powerful, glorious kingdoms in the history of humankind. They had wealth, they had plenty, they had lots of prosperity. They were located in a warm climate between two rivers. Mesopotamia means the area between two rivers. It is one of the most, it's in what's called the Fertile Crescent. If you ever study the rise and falls of kingdoms and stuff, they had what was called geographic determinism, which means where they lived was some of the best geography on the whole planet for people to live. Great weather, plenty of water, grow anything there. All kinds of agriculture. If you got lots of agriculture, you got lots of free time because you can feed all your people. They're in the middle of all these different trade routes for everything else that gets traded on the country, or in the world, goes through their country. The only place that has better geographic determinism than Babylonia was Israel. Just in case you were curious, God put his people in the best place on the whole planet when it comes to trade and natural resources and good weather and all that type of stuff. It's all there. So the Babylonians come up, and this is this golden kingdom. If you remember from Daniel, Daniel's talking about Nebuchadnezzar. You're the head of gold on the statue. Why is that? Because you're as good as it gets. In terms of earthly kingdoms, you're as good as it gets. So all the stuff that it's saying here about how great you are, you're not going to be called that anymore. Well, remember, when Isaiah's writing it, they haven't been called that yet. You're no longer going to be the mistress of the kingdoms. Why? Verse 6. I was angry with my people. I profaned my heritage. I gave them into your hand, and you showed them no mercy. On the aged you made your yoke exceedingly heavy. You said, I shall be mistress forever, so that you did not lay these things to heart or remember their end. Now, God admits and says, I was angry with my people. I was doing this to my people. I was using you to punish my people. And yet, when you were used to punish my people, you went too far. You did not show any mercy on the aged. You did not show any mercy at all. Because you said, I'm as good as it gets. I'm going to be this wonderful, exalted kingdom, and there's never going to be an accounting for what I do. And God says, there's an accounting for everybody. Let's keep reading here. Now, therefore, hear this, you lover of pleasures, who sit securely, who say in your heart, I am, and there is no one beside me. I am, there's nobody beside me. If I was to say this today, I know I've talked about it at other times, it's all about me. It's all about me. Babylon, you said it's all about me. Now, the verbiage here is, I am and there is no one beside me. How often do we see that today? It's all about me. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. We have well, I hate to call them parties. They're more like criminal organizations, but we have political parties in this country. And every 4 years, it's all about whatever, right? It's all about this. It's all about our guy is better than your guy. Whatever. And then the rest of us are going, well, let's see, we've got evil and more evil. We're going to vote for the lesser of two evils. Have you ever figured out that you're voting for evil either way? Anyway, that's a side thing. It's all about me. It's all about how I want to run this country. It's all about how I want to run the world. The world would be a better place if we ran it my way. Now, there's a handful of you in here who are old enough to know who Frank Sinatra is, other than just him being mentioned in a movie or something. I did it my way. Now, there's some other ones in here that are old enough to remember the Sid Vicious version of that. Yeah, and you're nodding your heads too, you hippies. Anyway. If the shoe fits, come down to Sinners Row and repent. It's okay. Here's the thing. We all want to do it my way. Human pride is not anything new. Whether it's individually, whether it's a group, whether it's a nation. And God says here, I am and there's no one besides me. You said, I will not be a widow or know the loss of children. Both of these things shall come upon you in a moment and one day. The loss of children and widowhood shall come upon you in full measure, in spite of your many sorceries and the great power of your enchantments. There's a couple things here. Babylon was taken over. It says here, it's going to come on you in one day. This is a prophecy. How many days is it going to take for the whole nation of Babylon to fall, according to what's right here? One. Very good. I can count to one. I can sometimes get the other six. I can count to one. Book of Daniel. They're having a party. The king of Babylon is so impressed with how powerful he is and all these kingdoms and all these gods that have fallen to Babylon. And he brings in the dishes that were used in the service of the Lord God Almighty in Jerusalem. And they start pouring wine into the dishes that were only to be used for the priests. And they start eating meat off of dishes that were only to be used in the service of God's temple. And I've got to think that because they're Babylonians, they probably were not eating kosher food. And they're celebrating how great Babylon is. And the Medes and the Persians are surrounding their city. And they have nothing to fear. They have years worth of food. They have all the water that they need. They're going to be able to withstand any siege because they figure the countryside won't be able to support all these troops that are out there. The king of Assyria diverted the Euphrates River, which ran through the city. When the city's water supply disappeared, they walked in the riverbed and walked in underneath the great big huge thick tall walls of Babylon. And the city of Babylon fell, not just in one day, it fell in one night. And the Persians didn't have to fire a single catapult at it. So great was their fall as it took some people 3 days to figure out they'd already lost. Because the Persians were in. But it happened in one day. What did God say? This is going to come upon you in a moment. In one day. I'm going to wipe you out. All these things that you're afraid of, actually they weren't afraid of them. Why aren't they afraid of them? Because they engage in sorcery and enchantments. I don't know if you realize this or not, but basically every single occultic practice that we know originates in Babylon. Now, it originated before Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? Babylon was very much into the occult. And the occultic practices that we have that are even practiced today, many of them are rooted, actually I think almost all of them are rooted in the practices of Babylon. So when God says here, in spite of your many sorceries and the great power of your enchantments, you felt secure in your wickedness. You felt secure in the evil you were doing. You thought what you were doing, you knew it was wrong. You thought it was okay. You said, no one sees me. Now, does it seem like sometimes we do evil or we see other people doing evil, and does it seem like they're getting away with it? Oh, yeah. Have you ever said, why doesn't somebody do that? Something about that. I usually say that, and it usually involves driving and commuting to work. Why isn't there a cop around when you need one? Yeah, and then if they're around when I'm not paying close attention to the speed limit, I wonder why they're around. There's other times they could have been around, have been useful. Except for when it's me, right? So we say this even today. They feel secure. Nobody sees me. Nobody knows what I'm doing. Your wisdom and your knowledge led you astray, and you said in your heart, I am, and there is no one besides me. You said in your heart, here I am. It's all about who? Me. It's all about me. And I can do what I want. I can do what I want the way I want, when I want. It's all about me. I am. There is no one beside me. Well, that's even worse than it's all about me. At least if it's all about me, there's a chance that you might include somebody else as being there. No, it's only what I want. Selfishness, materialism, is what we are told in the New Testament is the same thing as idolatry. If it's all about you, and you're worshiping you, and that's idolatry, who's your God? You are. Do you think the real God might go, no, that's not right? Do you think that the real God expects us to recognize him as God and give him credit for being God? Now, Jehovah God did not expect the Babylonians to follow Jewish law. But he did expect to be recognized as God. But evil shall come upon you, which you cannot charm away. This evil that's coming, you don't have an enchantment for that. You don't have a sorcery for that. You don't have a magic spell. You're not going to be able to sacrifice enough to some other god to protect you when this comes upon you. Disaster shall fall upon you, which you shall not be able to ward off, and ruin shall come upon you suddenly, of which you know nothing. Remember I said it took some of them 3 days to figure out the Medes and the Persians were in control of the city? That's sudden. Imagine one day you woke up and you found out there had been a war and China had taken over the entire United States. And then you found out about it. It happened last week and nobody told you. You didn't get the tweet. God says that's what's going to happen. Guess what? That's what happened. Now, verse 12. Stand fast in your enchantments and your many sorceries, upon which you've labored from your youth. Perhaps you may be able to succeed. Perhaps you may inspire terror. Wait a second, this is God being a little bit sarcastic here. Go ahead, use your magic, do your thing. See how that's going to work out. You are wearied by your many consultations. Let those who study the heavens stand up and save you. Those who gaze at the stars, and may each new moon predict what shall befall you. Anybody in here know what their astrological sign is? Mine's Pisces. I'm going to just confess that since I'm up here this morning. Back when we had newspapers, did you ever read in the newspaper what your horoscope was? Because it was always on the same page. It's like right across from the comics, and Ann Landers or Dear Abby, depending on who your paper ran, was right there, and it had your horoscope. Right? What if you really believed in that stuff? What if you were waiting for somebody to tell you what the stars said were going to happen to you? The Babylonians did that as an entire culture. They believed that stuff. See, they are all like stubble. The fire consumes them. They cannot deliver themselves from the power of the flame. No coal for warming oneself is this, no fire to set before. Since you are those with whom you have labored, who have trafficked with you from your youth, they all wander about in their own paths. Because of all this, because of your sorceries, because of your astrology, because of your predicting the future, because of all the things that you do, because of the fact that it's all about you. He says it in there twice. It's kind of it's a short chapter. He says it in there twice. It's all about you. There's no one beside you. You're your own God. You do it your way. Since all of that is true, Babylon, what's the very last thing, the very last part, the very last phrase in the chapter? There is no one to save you. Nobody is going to save Babylon. I want you to compare that to how the chapter started. Who's Israel's Savior? Let's just flip right back to it. We were right there. Verse 4. Our Redeemer, the Lord of hosts, is his name, is the Holy One of Israel. What does it mean to redeem? Anybody in here were so broke you had to go down to the pawn shop and get a loan? Maybe some of your guns or something, you had to go down there, you needed a loan. There's no way you're getting any money because you ain't got no job, is to turn over something that's worth something. And they'll give you 20 cents on the dollar, 30 cents on the dollar if you're lucky. What if you had to pawn Grandpa's shotgun because you're so hard up for cash? But then you got you a good job and you made a couple good paychecks and you went down there and you wanted to get the shotgun back. That's redeeming it, right? Who's going to buy it back? When it comes to God's people, who's going to buy them back? He is. That's exactly right. When it comes to, hey, there's been this big mess. You guys got yourself into this mess. You wouldn't repent of your mess. God punished you because of all the stuff you did. You broke his rules. They did what they did. They worshiped false gods. They did that. Who is gonna redeem them? God is. Who's going to redeem the Babylonians? Nobody. You know why? They ain't got a real God. Christian, do you have a real God? Do you have a real God? Is your God real? You got to make this up. You got to make a decision in your own mind. Is God real? Is there really a God in heaven? Does he really care about people? Did he really send his son to die on a cross so that my sins could be forgiven, so that I sold myself to the devil. That's what sin is. Sin is taking yourself and going, you know what, God, you got your thing, I'm going to go here. You pawned yourself out to Satan for nothing. Not even 20 cents on the dollar. You sold yourself over to the devil. That's what you did when you sinned. Who can go in there with something that is worth enough to buy you back? Who is gonna go buy you back?
Jesus did.
Jesus did. What if you don't got Jesus? What if you believe in the astrology or sorcery or whatever other gods it was that they used to worship and sacrifice to? Who is there in that event to buy you back? Nobody. What's your faith in? Is your faith in what the world tells you to put your faith in? Back during the time of Babylon, you put your faith in what the Babylonians are putting their faith in. They're the ones who got the money. They're the ones who got the power. They got the armies. They got the big fortifications. They got all the stuff that you would think would be successful. Except for they didn't have God. So when trouble came, the king had a big drunken party, made fun of the God of the Israelites, and in one day, they lost it all. And God told them it was going to happen long before they ever took over and were God's instrument for punishing the Jews for their sins. That's Isaiah 47 this week. Thank you for putting up with me. We're going to see next week in 48, God's going to talk about Israel returning. He's talking about them returning before they ever left. Because he's a God who knows the beginning from the end. You can trust him. He's going to work it out according to his plan. Micah, you got a song for us?